Hey, thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for
Ready.
joining me on an N of one today. I love that you get to spend some time with me. You and I always have such good conversations. I'm betting this is going to be a fun one. So, quick reminder on the theme of the
Yes.
podcast, right? So, there's not a ton of really senior behavioral scientists running around in the world. And so, even though we're used to talking about large numbers in a small sample size, an N of one can be a lot. So the goal of the podcast is always to walk through your individual N of one experience, the beautiful story that you, KK, have been on, so that others can sort of glean how that might relate to their stories and how they might find a way forward in behavioral science. Sound like a plan?
Love it. Yes. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. So we got to start where we always start, which is with young KK. Give me like 7, 8 year old. What are the vibes?
Oh my gosh. The vibes are a lot of energy, very outgoing, curly haired kid in competitive gymnastics, having moved. Actually, don't know where I was living at that time, but we moved a little bit when I was a kid. So was always kind of making a bunch of new friends, really learning about adaptability, and had a lot of big dreams since I was little.
What did you want to do when you were 8?
When I was 8, I think I wanted to be a nun. I had been convinced by my grandmother that when you were a nun, you got to hang out with your friends all day. You got to go hang out with kids and teach and do types of community work that I really loved. You could have a garden, and then you got to be in contemplation, which I know sounds kind of crazy for an 8-year-old, but I really loved prayer and nature, and I was really strongly connected as an 8-year-old spiritually. So I thought, hey, being a nun sounds great. No boys, sounds awesome.
I was going to say, when you describe it that way, it doesn't really sound, I
It
could see behavioral
sounds amazing.
scientists, nuns, right? Like
Yes.
and if you look at, I mean, look, there's a whole podcast on the Catholic Church, I'm sure, but like, if you look at traditions like the Jesuit tradition, et cetera, they're not totally dissimilar from behavioral science. They're very behaviorally rooted. They're very scholarship rooted. So I could get there.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of mysticism that you can, I think there's a lot of mystery in some of the traditions. And so that I really loved. I loved that. Still love that.
but you're not, I mean, KK has not turned out to
But
be.
I'm not a nun. No, I've had several moments in life where I was like, should I reconsider this? But ultimately, I am not. I am married and I am a lay person. I am not a clergy person.
Maybe grandma got it right when you're mad
Yeah.
at your partner. So wait, so fast forward a couple years, like, are we at 12 at 13 still a nun? Or has that already?
No, 12, 13, I was down in my mind an artistic path. So I thought maybe I could be a professional artist, a studio artist, loved working with my hands and painting and again, being outside, running around. But I had a dream of being an artist until I was in high school, really, and somewhere or another. I wanted to go to art school. I wanted to pursue that dream. And ultimately, I did study fine arts in undergraduate as a double major, and it was really helpful for me to have the exposure to what it actually means to be a working artist. But back then, I still had that kind of pure sense of going outside, painting by the river, and again, hanging out with friends. And yeah, that was really my goal.
I got it. So nun artist. I love this.
Yes. Yes.
But you mentioned in there, hey, something changed in high school. Like, what sort of experience made you go, hey, maybe this full-time art thing isn't really like for me?
I was humbled by the fact that it's obviously very difficult to make a living in that way. And my parents were supportive in so many ways of my creative endeavors, but we're like, you can't go to college to become a professional artist. You need a backup. And um, I mean, practically, I'm very grateful for that. So I think in college is when I studied art at university in Los Angeles and kind of got involved in the LA art scene and realized this is not that pure vision of painting and thinking about, expression of these mystical narratives that will get you ahead in the art world. The art world is just like any other industry in the sense that it's a business and there is a lot of power structures at play. And ultimately, I was sort of told, like, your art is folk art. It is not high art. And I was like, I don't think I want to be here anymore.
Yeah, that's a really quick way to dismiss somebody. You and I were talking before the
Yep.
podcast about my continuing tirades on sexism and classism and racism,
Yes.
and folk art is like a lovely way of saying we're just going to choose not to value that thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Mexican American art is not that type of art that you will make millions of dollars on. So that's kind of over here in this lower art category. Yeah, that was really heartbreaking, but I've been able to bounce back from that, and during COVID had my own little art renaissance, and I can make art again for fun after many years of really not being able to. So I appreciate that.
It's such a terrible squashing thing to say to somebody. I
Yes.
always love the definition of art. So I read only fiction books. I read nonfiction studies and fiction books.
Love it.
And the reason I do that is, you and I live in a circle of people such that we have lots of access to experts. And so, whatever New York Times nonfiction book is on the best, someone will just summarize that shit to me, right?
Yes.
Like, and these days, ChatGPT can summarize. Like, there's lots of
Yeah.
opportunities for summarization. Art is that which is not summarizable. It's reduced through summarization, right? You cannot cut out a part of Romeo and Juliet. It makes it worse when you do that. And if you
Hmm.
summarize Romeo and Juliet, it sounds kind of dumb.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's this beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
so when you dismiss somebody's art in that way, it feels so, someone who grew up in rural Oregon where there's lots of traditional art crafts,
Yes.
my bus driver painted and they were beautiful. And,
Yes.
okay, maybe they're not going to hang in the Guggenheim, but I,
Yeah.
I liked them.
Right. Right. Who cares? I think we have that kind of like, well, this is what it means to be successful. These museums, institutions, and practically there's making money off of an art that feels livable. But we are all, I do believe we're all artists. I believe we're all creative. I still try whenever we're doing workshops around UX or with any type of team, always bringing that ethos into whatever we're doing. It really does unlock all those little kid artists, that bus driver doing his like hobby art. Bring that to your craft of behavioral science of whatever you're doing because it is a part of all of us. And it's a bummer that it's being gatekept in this way where we think art's this far away high thing and not something we can practice every day.
Yeah. So you went to college and you did fine art on one side and then anthro on the other side, right? You were an anthro kid.
I did Anthro on the other side, which was incredible. I couldn't believe that I got to do like spend time learning about other people and exploring culture, which for me was such a novel concept. I had never really thought about culture in this way that you could study and isolate and compare. It was really insightful. I loved anthro. I still love anthropologists. Some really incredible, funky people at these conferences. Love them. The discipline has come far in its history, which is great. Speaking of classism and racism and all the problems of anthro, but that was a huge opportunity for me to kind of capture a lot of things that I felt I was always interested in, drawn to, and engaged in, and be like, no, this is actually a real thing you can study and um, develop as a craft. So I really love anthropology still.
Which, going back to the art thing is also, some of art learning is about, oh, it's not just my, creative ideas. Like I'm always, I tell my son about having gone and seen the Dolly exhibit in Philly, and the first room was his like student sketches, and you saw him like mimic, like, okay, I'm going to try and do it like Michelangelo, and then I'm going to try, like, you know, and then he's doing dripping clocks. But he
Yes.
didn't start with dripping clocks, right? Like, there's this period of learning how to do it the way that everybody else has done it before you try and go and break that piece. When you were in college and you're learning these two things, so you're learning over here, hey, art has some fundamentals, right? Then you're learning like, okay, I
Hmm.
can study anthro. Did that feel
Hmm.
left brain, right brain disjointed, or did it feel like, oh no, these are two related disciplines that are coming together for me?
it felt so cohesive because I could almost express my ethnography visually. In fact, that was my senior thesis, was taking my experience of having lived in a year in Chile and putting that into portraits and yeah, I don't remember what I called them at the time, but essentially portraits of different characters that I think again, my approach to ethnography, my approach to art was a blend. And again, maybe a little out there for my anthro professors who were kind of like, oh, well, this is like, what is this? Poems on these
What are
characters
you
I would make
doing?
surrounding the ethnography. Yeah, they're like, this is weird, but okay. So for me, it felt supernatural and getting to say, we're looking at, the different ways in which people raise children, child rearing and birth, especially that I had this class called birth in cross-cultural contexts, and then learning about the different ways in which women around the world, people around the world give birth, going and then looking at the art from these different areas of the world, or sometimes these different tribal groups. It was like, in my mind, like the most incredible dot connection all the time. I loved, I loved my two undergraduate studies in particular. Clearly, I still love them. If I could
I
go
was
back and
gonna
like
say,
just continue to look at the library all day, and I was like, oh, it's a happy place.
yeah, I was gonna say you're using the past tense, but I'm not sure this is all that past tense for you, my friend. But
Yeah,
then you
no.
but then you graduate and you need to get a
Yes,
job. Like, tell me about
yes.
coming out of college, in that early 2010 sort of period, which was not the greatest economy, not the greatest boom. Like, what did it feel
Yes.
like to graduate having had this anthro art sort of conglomeration for you?
hmm I was really lucky that I had done a lot of exploration in my senior year around what does it mean to apply these very potentially esoteric skills to the business world. And I was also really lucky to be offered an internship with a company, essentially a tech startup that had stabilized a bit. Oh, yes,
Sorry, we don't use the word luck on this podcast. We're scientists and
lucky. Okay.
we don't believe in luck.
Privilege?
So
Blessed?
let's rewind into that senior year.
Okay.
So
Good
talk to me
point.
about these
Yeah.
explorations. Were these, you were seeking out opportunities? These were opportunities that came from a professor? Like, luck is just opportunity acted upon. Tell me a little bit about that senior
True.
year opportunity matrix that's coming
Yes.
up for you.
I was really proactive in finding, reaching out, like cold emailing to different people that I admired in the different fields. I asked my professors for introductions to different applied anthropologists or organizations that were looking to hire more applied anthropologists. I applied for about a bajillion internships and opportunities, and through that was also able to chat to folks, even if I didn't end up getting the opportunity. And then ultimately, what led to my job was a conversation with my dad's extended network. I said, like, my dad was like, you need a job. Let me help you. Why don't you talk to this person and this entrepreneur and this? Surprisingly, that really was the way. I mean, yeah, I'm like, oh, that's nepotism in a way for sure. But
Well, but is
it
it
was helpful to talk to. Yeah.
it's not cheating to just not taking the hardest path is not a form of cheating, right? Like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I use this mythical example all the time where, I tell people in office hours, like, when you're looking for a project, cheat. Like, if your brother owns a kebab shop and he is willing to let you like redo the menu and move the things around and try and sell more kebabs so that you have a case study of like changing
Good point.
behavior around kebabs, do it. Like,
Yes.
there's nobody is
Yes.
having a requirement here where we're like, you know what, KK, you got to do the hardest possible version of all of this.
That's a really good point. And I think too, what I've noticed, I mean, throughout my career, the way in which I stay up to date on news, thoughts, the way I develop ideas. It's all collaborative. It's always with my friends, my family, so and so from work, so and so with you, with reading your stuff here and then connecting the dots over here. It's always in some type of community or conversation with other people. And so it is so important, regardless, for me, that's really where I fuel that's what you're going to hear throughout my career. That's really what's fueled me. It's just chatting to people that I like, people that are smarter than me.
And there's an important part in there. There's a lot of conversational networking right now to get a job, right? but it feels inauthentic
Hmm.
because it's just a coded job application, right? It's a different form of job application. What I hear you saying is like you're
Yes.
genuinely excited by people. It's not like I'm taking this call so I can get a job. I'm taking this call because I'm genuinely excited by the fact that I'm learning from people every single day.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds cheesy, but it's true.
I don't think it's cheesy at all. I think it's one of the defining characteristics. I mean, all of the really good applied behavioral scientists I know are intrinsically rewarded by discovering things about humans, right? They are just deeply
Hmm.
curious about.
Good point.
I don't know what it would look
That's
like to
true.
be
Yeah.
a very senior applied behavioral scientist, but not curious about humans. I'm imagining it's possible, but I don't. It just doesn't really
True.
resonate with the people who really end up here. Um, and so,
Yes, that's
following
a really good point.
that authentic piece. So then you talk to your dad's friend. There's this, there's this opportunity in front of you. Like, how did you feel?
Yes.
Like, tell me about going into this.
Yeah. I was so excited. I took an internship for 6 months as an HR intern at an office in Costa Rica. So they had a location in the United States and they had a location in the Philippines and small place in like two people potentially in Scotland. And then they had a large office in Costa Rica. They basically hired me because they were like, you speak Spanish and we're having a crisis there and we don't have anyone in this HR role, so probably like anthropology is relevant and like you speak Spanish, so you should go do that. What I didn't know is that I would go and be in charge of HR, of payroll, of benefits, of firing people, of hiring people, and I was 22 years old, completely ignorant in so many things and ways of the world, but so grateful for the opportunity. And it was such a go into the deep end, tossing off the diving board, like, what am I doing here? But learned so quickly from that. I look back and I think, wow, I have so much gratitude for the employees that worked in that office for me at the time. They were so patient with me not knowing anything. Costa Rican labor law, it's serious, just like anywhere. And I had a huge learning curve to figure that out and was having to defend the company in front of judges. And I mean it was crazy actually looking back what I did, but that's kind of startup life, and that's really how I learned so much.
And had you lived in Costa Rica before, or like have you even been to Costa Rica, or like
No, I had been for a week of my IB Spanish class that I took in high school to have like a nice little easier IB class. We went for a week and that's all. And I had gone to a completely different part of the country. So no, it was the first time.
everything was this, glorious chaos as you sort of figure it out. And it is, we've done enough ends of one interviews now that certainly there is a thematic piece where a lot of the senior folks had disproportionate responsibility early. They had some early job, whether it was like,
Interesting.
becoming the head of product at Thrive for me, or, doing this thing at Tracks for you. There's this like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but someone's handed me the keys and I better figure out how to drive this car kind of mentality that
Yep.
really powers you. And you were there for a good long time, almost 5 years, right?
Yeah, so then the internship turned into a full-time thing. I moved around a bit, realized too, like, oh, HR, I really liked HR in a lot of things, but realized that there's this whole other side to HR around talent development and career development. And so sort of wrote this manifesto to the CEO being like, we could do more in HR. And he's like, great, you can do it. You go, you're in charge. And then here's your head chief talent officer. You two start this new department. And again, like grateful because that was another like, okay, so now you're creating all types of other things that you are not really equipped to do, but you're going to figure it out. And with them, I traveled all around, lived in the Philippines, lived in Scotland, lived, yeah, in Costa Rica. So I was also then gaining such a global perspective on a lot of different topic areas, just loving having anthropology background, cross-cultural awareness, and understanding was incredible to be able to go and immerse myself in these different corporate cultures and local cultures. So absolutely loved that time in life. It was crazy. For the last year I was there, I wasn't in a country for more than 3 weeks at a time. I think actually for 2 years. So I was bouncing all around and incredibly fun, and I was getting really tired. So that kind of made me realize like I need something a little bit more, maybe not stable in a traditional sense, but I was experiencing some of that fatigue at the end there and realizing I didn't really want to continue doing HR or talent development long term. I was looking for my next thing.
Got it. And so, in the same way that many of the things came together, everything was new. Costa Rica is new, like HR is new, everything is new all at once. You also sort of felt
Yes.
like all of the other changes you wanted to make came at once. You wanted to be out of HR, you wanted to be out of sort of talent development, you wanted to be out of traveling the world, you wanted something, a complete reset. And what
Hmm.
did that, I mean, as you started picking your head up and looking around for this pivot, how did you decide where to pivot next? Like how did choosing
Yes.
sort of how did you experience choosing?
If you remember back in 2011, 12, 13, 14, IDEO, design thinking, it was all becoming democratized. It was becoming, here's your own human-centered design kit. Here's human-centered design kit for social action. And I loved what I was seeing out of this space. I would constantly watch TED Talks from different folks doing all types of like social impact startups and would devour the IDEO blog every day. One of my best friends worked in IDEO, so I was always like, "What are you guys doing? I want to work there. I want to do that." And after sort of becoming at the time, certified in design thinking, which you could get through IDEO at the time for like $300, I realized, oh, you know what? There's this way that you apply organizational design or design thinking to organizations, and that's org design. And so started doing more of that towards the end of my HR time, thinking, okay, it's not only about, fostering individual talent, it's also about a larger community culture of the workplace. There's a lot you can do in org design to address all types of workplace um, challenges and grow talent together. I was super fascinated with that side of the business and that side of talent and HR, but ultimately also felt like I needed a different type of like kind of like I was growing out a little bit of where I was going to be able to impact that at Trax. Trax was also went through round C of investment and acquired new owners. And so it just kind of felt like a good time to move on. Now, what I did next was not a linear thing. I, in fact, stopped working for a while and started my own thing as a yogapreneur. Again, this was 2014, 15, big yogapreneur boom. Everyone, or I felt, at least for me, it felt like this was this kind of tidal wave, like, you know, yoga classes online. And I ran yoga retreats. I moved to Italy. I moved to the Italian Riviera and started running yoga retreats for professors of yoga from all over to come. And I would like help host the retreats. And then ultimately that turned into a yoga studio. And I did that for about 2 years in Italy. At the same time, I started working for an Internet of Things startup during American time zone. So I was doing during the day yoga stuff and then would go and work from my computer on a contract basis for an Internet of Things startup. So then I kind of felt like I'm getting both of these worlds.
You're back to
And
college again. You've
um,
got it. You've got, fine art
yeah.
on one side, anthro on
Yeah.
the other.
Yeah, back to doing that. And then back to burning myself out and needing something completely different because that really wasn't sustainable. And I think being in Italy was so incredible, but the local culture was really about preservation. It was hard. I mean, I was in a really small town. That was really the main industry was tourism.
Why Italy? Where did this go? Like,
I fell in love with an Italian.
aha. This is making more sense now.
Amore. So yeah, that was the main way that kind of looking back, I wanted to be there no matter what. And this guy was a great excuse
Excuse.
and way that I could be there. So I appreciate that. But yeah, it was more like I just loved Italy. I loved Italian culture. I loved learning Italian. I loved I mean just it was an incredible, the quality of life I had was incredible. And so I like loved that. But the the way in which like most of the people in the town were above, like the average age was probably like in the 60s, and there weren't a lot of young people. There definitely weren't a lot of job opportunities for local Italians. And bringing in a yoga was kind of like weirdly perceived there, like, what is this yoga thing? Our clients were, me and my co-founder were more like Milanese, people that would come from Milano to vacation on the Riviera in the summer. But local folks, like, it wasn't, they were kind of like, yeah, there was a couple, but I wanted to go somewhere that innovation and that like startup energy was just palpable. Opposite, 100% opposite. I wanted chaos, more people, fast-paced life.
Not
And so I went
60-year-old
to Mexico
retirees
City.
on the Riviera. Not 60-year-old
Yes. Oh,
retirees
wait,
on
sorry,
the,
say that again.
not 60-year-old retirees on the Riviera.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this life is amazing. Yeah, if I was older and didn't, yeah, I was retired. I was living a retired life in a lot of ways, while at the same time working really hard, not really sleeping a lot. But I was like, I want the opposite of this. So that's how I ended up in Mexico City, which is indeed the opposite.
And did you go to Mexico City and then have connect with Numa and folks and start Monet, or like tell me a little more about how that all sort of came together for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I have to tell this because the personal drives, your career in so many ways. I got engaged to the Italian, went to my sister's wedding, back in the States, and was like, what am I doing? I can't do this. This isn't what I want. This is not the right person for me. Had one of these movie moments where I was supposed to fly back to Italy from where she was living in Tijuana in Mexico, and was in the airport and just like, I can't go. Like, we're running through the airport the opposite direction. Let me out. I can't go back to
Wait a
Italy.
minute. So
So
speaking as
um
someone who lives in San Diego, is this the Tijuana airport? You're like running through
this
the
was
Tijuana
San Diego
airport.
airport on
Okay,
the
so
other
you crossed
side.
over to San
Yeah.
Diego, and you were like, never mind. This
Yes.
is not.
Yeah. Yeah, the tram, like you can go. I did that, and then I was like, no. So I took the tram right back to Tijuana, and I was like, I'm never going back. I can't go back, gotta change everything. And because my sister was in Tijuana, Tijuana had a super cool, they still have super cool startup scene. They had like Startup Week Tijuana, all types of really cool tech stars, and a lot of investment in the entrepreneurial scene in Tijuana. Also, the culinary scene is incredible. My brother-in-law is a chef. He was exposing me to a lot of just really cool projects all over. It has an incredible, I love Tijuana. So I tried to get a job in Tijuana and couldn't. And so was offered a job doing an org design project in Mexico City. Again, short term, thought, well, let me go to mothership capital Mexico and see what that's all about. And then I can maybe network my way back to Tijuana. But I just fell in love with Mexico City. And the first experience was with Sala Uno, was an incredible company that offers scaled payment systems for offering eye surgeries in Mexico, all over Mexico City and on the outskirts of Mexico City, based on the model of Aravind in India. Really incredible mix, got me to see really what social impact looks like in action. We did a really cool design thinking sprint around their organization. And so I got to kind of really do the work I wanted to do with design thinking and HR kind of talent stuff together. Met one of my still closest friends through that, and through there was then offered a job at Numa. Again, networking, people. Mexico, Latin America, very people oriented. So you are just constantly um, like making friends with your colleagues. Your colleagues are not just your kind of colleagues over here. It's everything together. And so, again, thanks to relationships, thanks to the community, got a job at Numa running their incubation program. Was funded by a VC. Again, what did I know about running an incubation program, an accelerator program? Like nothing. I knew nothing.
Well, but again, not true, right? It turns out when you get in there, you actually, many businesses are the details are different, but the building blocks are the same. And you did have this fantastic experience, right? Now, as a current San Diegan, I have to be offended that you said that Mexico City was better than Tijuana. Like, I don't know how I feel about that.
I
Uh,
know, I'm sorry. I think it's better. I just really liked both. I liked Mexico City for what I wanted at the time.
uh,
I love San Diego though. I would move there in a moment in like a beat.
I hear you. I will graciously allow this slight to pass. But so you're in Mexico City. You're making friends with everybody. You're doing this stuff. Uh, if I had come to you, this is like 2017, 2019. If I had said, "Okay, KK, like talk to me about behavioral science," was that on your
Hmm.
radar? Because we're about to enter the zone of KK goes and like does the LSC, like official behavioral science stuff. So like,
Yes.
where was this in the vernacular of your mind? You and I have a slight age difference. I don't even have hair anymore, right? And so when I started, it wasn't a, that was there was no term. But by this time,
Right.
2017, it's at least somewhat a thing. So where did behavioral science did you start to go from this IDEO version of sort of design thinking, innovation,
Mhm.
incubation to this like maybe IDEO adjacent thing of behavioral science?
Yeah. Great question. So, what I learned, so through Numa, we were doing incubation acceleration.
Mhm.
Naturally, given entrepreneurs' interest, given at the time the real trend of fintechs emerging from Latin America, there was a lot of questions around helping change financial habits, startups to help rural farmers in Chiapas open a bank account. We were doing corporate innovation and we were working with banks and financial institutions. And I realized, okay, so thanks to design thinking, I can do really incredible research. We can build a really intuitive app. We could make it culturally relevant in like an indigenous language that this group in Chiapas might speak. But how do I think about changing someone's perception of saving with a financial institution where historically that's been a lot of mistrust? It's been inaccessible. Formal banking is just very different for a lot of people in all of Mexico as well. This idea that you would give your money to this institution and then that would be beneficial for you in the long term. And it's just like it's a really foreign concept. So I realized I was missing something in my toolbox. I wanted to do these larger impact projects that companies and startups were coming with, and I felt limited. I felt like I don't really know how else to do this. There must be something else. And truly, I didn't know about behavioral science until a friend's wedding shower. Her friend sat next to me and had done a master's at UCL in behavioral change. And I was like, wait, what is this? I had never known what this is about and learned from her, did my own research. And I was like, okay, actually, wait, this answers this question that I have about how you change behavior like so directly. I didn't know that existed.
And we're back to that continuing theme of that genuine curiosity for people in the world led you to talk to this person next to you, led to you to sort of pull on those threads. But it sounds like it really felt
100%.
immediately resonant with you, right? I mean, you sort of,
Yes.
as you found out about it, you were like, oh, I've been looking for this.
Yes. No, I left that event and I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing next with my life. Great. And because the UK institutions offer 1 year master's programs, I was like, great, I could do that. That feels more accessible financially. It's much cheaper than doing anything in the US. Mexico didn't really have any master's programs like that. So, really left and very soon thereafter started paving the path to apply to LSE for their master's in behavioral science. It was going to be one of the first years that they ran that program, not in an executive level, but in a full-time master's, and was so excited to, yeah, again, just so excited to start like finding these answers where I thought really gratefully I was 30 or 31 by the time I started that program. And I was so glad that I had waited so long before doing a master's so that immediately was like, first of all, this is a luxury that we're sitting in class all day. We get to read and write and just like hang out and do this. And I don't think I would have had that perspective had I come younger. I would have felt like school was still more of like a job. But I was like, have you ever worked full time? This is amazing. This is incredible. So I was one of the older students, absolutely loved it and learned, yeah, basically everything that I wanted to learn. It was a really incredible experience.
That's awesome. I mean, it is. I am a big advocate of if you're going to do it, wait. Um, I think that you need life experiences and other things. It's one of the things that like the UPenn program has struggled with, right? Because it's kind of half new grad,
Yeah.
half sort of, and they frequently look at each other across the room and go, "About you." I mean, it is tough.
Yeah.
Um, but the data tells us, right, when you start, you're so much more likely to use it and get all the way through if you start when you're older. Um,
hmm
and
Yeah. And then I was really able, the reason why I really liked LSE as well is because I felt like because I come from art, anthropology, HR, a lot of soft skills, a lot of creativity, really strong in ideation. And thanks to working with the VC through Numa, I was able to look more at business models and think a little bit more linearly and think about financial impact and learn how to do some of that analysis. But I felt really weak in being able to run rigorous research. I didn't remember statistics since I had took it when I was in high school and felt like I was really weak on the quant side and some of that hard scientific thinking. So was happy to go to an institution where it's like London School of Economics. It's going more really deep, more deep into that level of analysis and thinking. And that was also really hard. It was hard to come in as an older student and be like, I don't remember, I don't know what a regression is, I don't remember, and catch myself up from however many years to get to the place that a lot of other folks were coming in at. And it was really impactful. I thought my whole life I'm a creative person, I'm an artistic person, I'm not a math person. I'm not good at science. I'm not good at that. And in fact, I am good at that. I am capable of that. It's a type of reasoning and logic that I was able, I think, to approach a different angle through behavioral science. And it was incredible for my sense of self to say, no, no, actually, I think a lot of women and girls are told, like, you're created, like left brain, right brain. No, no, you're that brain. You're not the other brain. And then I identified with that a lot.
Yeah, I love the way that you're bringing out the creativity. One of the questions I get all the time is because it has science in the name, people look at behavioral science and think, "Oh, I don't, we had this at Frog, right? Like, frogs who are like, "Oh, I'm super creative. I don't want to do this science thing. I'm creative." I'm like, "Science is incredibly creative." Right? It's
Mhm.
incredible language for creativity. Like statistics is this incredible language for creativity. But, to your
Yes.
point, it's sort of a, swing around the mountain a little bit. What do you think?
Yes.
Did you have what was the plan? You like go to UCLA, I'm sorry, LSE, and then did you have a thought on like what would happen after you became a behavioral scientist?
I wanted to go and kind of finish what I started in Mexico in a lot of ways, like kind of go back to in my mind, I imagined like returning to some of these clients that we had and to say, I have a great idea for how we could actually get some farmers in Chiapas to start saving, or like how we could approach a financial savings program. So I wanted to go, yeah, just right back and do what I was doing before. However, I wanted to, I loved being in London. And so that evolved. As I was there, I thought, you know what, if I can get some opportunities to be here for a little longer and form my expertise from other experts in this field, then I can go back and then it could be great. But that did not work out like that. When I was in grad school, COVID hit and I had an incredible opportunity at a behavioral science firm. It was rescinded that summer. It was so much uncertainty, and I went back to Mexico City right away. So I just kind of, instead of going that way, I went that way. And then through that opportunity, started doing freelancing around behavioral science and working with clients exactly like what I said. Hey, I think I have a better idea of what we could do now. And worked back with a lot of different fintech opportunities and other incubators and accelerators around the city to kind of inject some of the behavioral science thinking inside of that phase where you're validating your business and business model and product market fit. So it felt like very exciting. Loved what I was doing. The problem was that I was still needing to pay for my student debt in pounds and I was earning in pesos and it's a terrible conversion rate.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
I hear that completely. Talk to me a little bit about first of all, it cannot go unnoticed that every city you go to, you fall in love with. You're like, I go to here and then I fell in love with it. And then I went here and then I fell in love with it. There is a true, like, Romany anthropologist in there somewhere,
Yeah.
like this, you have got the Roma genes in there somewhere wanting to be
Yeah.
in these places. Um, Talk to me a little bit about that setback of having an offer at a behavioral science consultancy and then COVID, you know, there so many of us talk about all of the successes, right? Part of the career and
Mm,
setbacks along the way. It's not a failure. You didn't do anything wrong, right? But it was a setback.
yeah,
How did you handle,
absolutely.
how'd you handle that? How'd you manage through it? Like, what supported you through that moment that helped you come out the other side?
Hmm. Oh, great question. I had a lot of lows in that time because I was in my mind on this upward trajectory and then not having security after and having looming student debt felt like it felt sometimes really unbearable. Like, how am I going to be paying for this? We had my husband and I had gotten married before I left, and we were remote for that year. So he wasn't, I came back to Mexico in our kind of holiday break in December, but then we were remote for that time. And so he was also facing some similar hardships where he had started this really incredible restaurant bar concept with all types of different little offshoots and remodeled this incredible historic building in Mexico, similar. Like, it was part of this founding team, and then COVID hit, and then he was not able to open. People weren't continuing to do construction. I mean, they were also facing, so both of us with this financial uncertainty and just general world uncertainty was really tough. So I also don't want to overlook how I was really struggling at that time. At the same time, I think I had been in times of uncertainty and kind of like financial restraint before. We really are, I think, just you get so scrappy in working with startups and moving a lot in it just sort of felt like, well, I can always find a way to make it work. I'll teach yoga classes online. In fact, like, I started teaching yoga classes online again. I was like, I'll figure this. I can do this in the meantime. And I was able to defer some of my student loans. That was really helpful. But um, I am grateful. It was, again, probably my relationships, my family and my friends, just maintaining each other grounded in that. And I have to say, I also really enjoyed some of the periods of lockdown in London, as hard as a time that was for everyone. I don't want to be insensitive about the difficulties there, but I was living in the dorms as again, like 31-year-old, the tiny dorm sharing with five girls. They all left and went back to their homes all over the world. And it was just me by myself, London completely emptied. I was living in right by LSE in this financial center of London. And that's actually when I really fell in love with London, because I would just walk everywhere to the parks. It was becoming spring, the flowers, but I didn't know flowers just came up out of the ground. I truly was like, what is this? This is a miracle. I had never been in an environment where you would pass through like winter to spring that way. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So it was like this darkness with this light, this time of also immense like contemplation and silence and like a non-existence in a lot of ways. And then this like, okay, but writing my thesis, exploration, uncertainty about what it means. I can't, it's just kind of was all of that together. And it was hard too, because I went back to Mexico, was doing freelance things, but applying to full-time jobs and getting a lot of rejection and doing all of the networking I could, hustling and just feeling like, I'm like, what is this for? I really relate to all this behavioral science about how unemployment is so terrible for your mental health. It's really hard. And it's not easy to keep getting up and keep applying and keep networking. And so it was a hard season. Oh, a lot of good and a lot of hardship.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very balanced perspective, but I'm so glad that you came through it because, you are such a great contribution to the field. I think there's so many people who don't make it out of that period and what a loss to the field that is, right? They don't get that key break, that key job that lets them continue down the path. And that, there's a lot of really wonderful people that we have missed out on because we
Yes.
couldn't find the right, opportunity for them. So I'm so glad that
Mhm.
that you did come out of that. What kinds of things were you applying for? I mean, I know where you ended up, and we're going to talk about it in a second. But like before we get there,
Yeah.
what kind of things were you applying to? Right. So you've graduated a behavioral science job. Or, you have this great eclectic background of sort of innovation and people and organizational psych and sort of all these different pieces.
Mhm.
Were you applying to UX things? Were you applying to sort of product things? Were you applying to HR things? You applying to all the things?
Yeah, all of the above, baby. I was applying to everything. I realized after applying and doing understanding more behavioral science jobs, so jobs that said behavioral science analyst, for example, that I was not strong enough still, probably in my experience and quant rigor to be able to thrive in a behavioral science analyst role. So early on, I kind of learned, okay, this is probably not where my skills will be best fit, or I could fit my skills there, but it's probably not where I'll stand out. So then I was looking at jobs, any job that had innovation in the title. Apply. Who is this? I want to know about this. And UX research came much later after more relationships built, more conversation. We were like, have you ever thought about this? And I'm like, I guess I could do that. Yeah, that sounds interesting. I could apply behavioral science in that way. I could apply this and that. But I had never really looked at that discipline as a specialist because I was always in startup land so generalist. So I was looking more at those like broader, like a product strategist role or a design strategist, something that would look across disciplines. UXR came much later in my exploration.
And I think that's such an important point situated now in the moment we are, right? We are in a constricted market. I was having an
Yes.
office hour with somebody today and I was just banging the drum of like, everything you're giving me is generalist. And that's not, we're not in a, generalists thrive when we have abundance. Specialists thrive when you have restriction, right? Because you know what you're
Yeah.
going to get from them. You could take a bet on a generalist and see there where that takes you when there's abundance. But when there's constriction, as there was during the market that you're talking about, having that specialized, getting down to like, what is the thing I physically, literally want to do and how do I want to do it? Um, so you ended up at LinkedIn. Was it like, did you know from the beginning, like you saw the JD and you were like, yes, that, like out of the hundreds of things, that? Or like, where did it start to light up for you that this might be such a lovely bringing together of some of your, sort of HR talent experience and some of your behavioral science experience?
It wasn't until I got into the second interview with LinkedIn where I talked to the hiring manager. Actually, she was above the hiring manager, she was the director. And I did a case study with her, Alyssa Stein. I will always be so grateful for Alyssa. She saw my scrappy experience. I presented a case on running research when I was doing freelance stuff after my grad degree, where we were looking at a healthcare app, and I was describing her the process, and I'm sure in her head she's like, wait, so to recruit the participants you just like asked the people who worked there if they had ill relatives? Like, excuse me, but that's what we did. Calls on Facebook, and people, I mean, there was no HIPAA, recall. It was like, we gotta, if you're interested and you have, we know. I had done the research, I had built the wireframes, I had built like basically from end to end this like product from ideation to creation. And she was like, wow, okay, I kind of looked at that as like almost embarrassing. Like, it was so scrappy. It's me freaking doing wireframing in Keynote. Like, I was not using Figma. I was not professional. I didn't feel like an expert, but she saw that, I think, as like, okay, you could figure this out then, because don't worry, we have our participant recruit pools. Like, you'll have a professional designer working with you. You don't have to do that. That's when I was like, oh wow, I feel like she kind of gets me beyond, kind of like I felt a lot in a lot of interviews, like I just wasn't, I didn't have that depth of expertise that they needed. And I think she was able to pull that out of me in an unexpected way. So that's when I was like, oh, I can't believe like LinkedIn would, I mean, especially I have to say, because I had never worked at an American company. I had never applied. I never thought I would go back to the US. And a big tech company was so intimidating for me. And I was like, just the fact that they would talk to me, they would consider me, like I was just overwhelmed with how much like that meant. I don't know. I just felt like, wow, this is an incredible, I can't believe they're talking to me. This is crazy. And then coming from Mexico and never having worked again in the US and never having worked in tech in the US, having worked only in startups, seeing the salary, I was like, this cannot be possibly real. Like this cannot be real. It was almost like overwhelming, too good to be true. So LinkedIn, yeah, was truly like a dream experience for to get hired there.
It is a totally bizarre when you break into something that you really didn't expect. I remember being in grad school, being in my PhD, and getting, the offer to be the head of product at Thrive, and it was still startup money, right? But it was New York startup money, and I remember
Yeah.
literally running around my like grad school cubicle and hugging the other grad students because there's more money than anyone in
Yeah.
the family had ever made. Right? I was just like, I
100.
can't believe you were offering that. Like, my mom has been a nurse for fucking 30 years, giving her,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
like,
Yeah, it's just like,
tell me
yeah,
about
the paradigm was not, it felt like, I can't believe this. You're joking, right? That can't be real.
it. And when you got in, did the contents of the box match the label? Like, was what you ended up doing kind of what you thought you would be doing, or was there a delta there? And if so, where did that delta come from?
Yeah. It's super different to work in a mature um, research organization. So I got in with a startup mentality and the scrappiness, whereas in a larger company and a mature research organization, there's too much risk to be that scrappy, and you don't need to spend time on certain things. They have a whole research operations team. I didn't need to recruit participants individually myself by asking people on Facebook and so and so. Like I had never really encountered that level of structure. So that was like, it felt like a luxury. Again, it felt just like, I can't believe this is all I have to do as a researcher. I just do are you kidding? I just do the research. I just do the actual, and then I hand it off. Like that can't be real. That's too easy. So that was like, I think a big shock. I had a lot of honestly culture shock, even though I grew up in the US until I was 18. I had a lot of culture shock being in an American corporate environment. And
Well, it's a different
that was something,
country. American corporations are
it's
like
so different.
they're like their own separate island from America, right? They don't really have
Yes,
anything to do
yes.
with the rest of reality.
Right. And then like tech, like Silicon Valley too, as an addition, I felt super like weird behind. I was shocked about everyone's I don't know, I just felt like, oh, I'm not like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't know how to say these things in the way that you're saying them. And so I think that was also a curve. The coziness, the comfiness of working sometimes in especially more not really anymore, but at that time in tech, where like the benefits are incredible and I got swag all the time, and it was okay if I took a lunch in the middle of the day. Like you were expected to like come to work and go home. Though those basic things, like Mexico is actually one of the hardest working countries in the world in the sense that they work more hours. So again, it just was completely different. So in that sense, no, I was totally shocked. I was totally floored. Like couldn't believe again, kind of like when I went to grad school and I was like, do you guys know how good we have it? Like I felt like that all the time at LinkedIn. Like, do you guys know how good we have it? We get free lunch. Are you kidding me? So that was that. But then I think the actual discipline itself was incredible because I had really like surrounded by like incredible research practitioners, and while no one was in a had a behavioral science background that I worked with, that felt like a cool additional skill that I could bring so that I could feel like I'm showing up with something even though I don't have like deep experience in as a UXR.
And was that there's sort of two versions of behavioral science, right? So one is, you call it behavioral science and it is explicitly behavioral science and it's in your title and, it's a very explicit form of behavioral science. And then there's a much more like Phantom of the Opera version of behavioral science where, you don't say you're doing,
Yeah.
you use it, but you don't say you're using it, right?
Yes.
Was
Yes.
in your first role at LinkedIn, did you feel like you were, people really identified you with behavioral science and it was an explicit sort of like lens that you were bringing, or was more, that's just
Yeah.
how I'm doing it. And, we're not really talking about it that way. We're just doing it that way.
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I definitely was annoying, whereas like kind of like typical new person. Again, I didn't know social norms around like when you should present, like volunteer to present at the all hands meeting. Like I was just like, oh yeah, sure, I would love to talk about behavioral science. Oh, at the
KK,
all hands design. Dang.
Are you trying to tell us you had big main character energy?
I just thought, oh, well, there's calls for ask. I actually was the opposite. I was like, oh, you can like present a topic. Oh yeah, sure. I would love to talk about behavioral science. And then I realized like, oh wait, no, you don't do that. That no, you're supposed to talk about these things there or like work things, not just like I have a topic. So I think because of my naivete in that way, people were like, yeah, 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 we get it, girl, like behavioral science, okay. Like, thank you. Because I was just had my little like keynote essentially. I was just giving all over the organization all the time whenever I could. So I got known, I think, for behavioral science in that way. Like that's why our mutual friend Kayla was like, you should talk to Matt. You should like, if you want to do behavioral science more, like there's these people that you should also connect with in the US. Because again, my network was LATAM. I was like behavioral science LATAM or Europe. And so I'm grateful for people being like Kayla saying, we love your behavioral science energy, like bring it. And like let's fit it into UXR in this way that's like doable because we can't run RCTs. We do have limitations on methodologically what we're able to do. But here's how, like, look at these other applied folks that can help you with that. And that was incredibly helpful for me to be like, okay, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I hear that. It is interesting to me that the behavioral science communities have not really sort of figured out how to cross borders as effectively as you sort of would expect them to, right? Like Europe has its own, like,
Yes.
everybody in London knows Rory. Know
Yes.
that like he's like well known in the United States, right? In the way,
True.
right?
True.
In the
Yeah.
same and places like Busar have done all these really fascinating things in some markets, but I don't know that they would be known in other markets. And it's sort of a weird, fragmented community. So it is so you and I are so lucky that we have a mutual friend who was able to sort of help us find each other. Especially because it wasn't
Yes.
it wasn't in your title. It's not on LinkedIn. It isn't clear that
Right.
someone looking for you would have found you in that way. And you have experienced some growth at LinkedIn. So as you've started to sort of move from experienced researcher to then sort of more innovation incubation sort of management and now sort of the head of US Research and Innovation Insights for marketing. Talk to me a little bit about career path within LinkedIn and how you sort of found your way through that interest. At Microsoft, I got laid off like 3 times, but it was really just like weird. Like it was the weirdest experience for me, like you as a stranger in corporate culture. They're like, we're laying you off, but we actually have another job for you. You just have to go home for 30 days and then we like move you into this other thing.
Yeah.
You're like, what is
Yeah.
the point of
Yeah.
any of this? It all feels like theater. Like,
Exactly. Totally, totally. I appreciate LinkedIn's culture, especially I think more in the times when I transferred. But because there was just a lot more like I think just we were in a like a better macroeconomic environment. But they really encourage internal transfers. So the my onboarding buddy when I joined as a UXR had transferred from sales. He was a sales guy and then he came into UXR. So you get this super interesting mix of people's disciplines and backgrounds and perspectives on the business. And so an opening came for, again, I was like innovation in the title at LinkedIn, give it to me. It was UX research and innovation insights, or maybe it wasn't called that at the time, but innovation was in the title somehow. And so I went through the process of transferring. It was not in the product org, it was in the marketing org. It's very uncommon to have a UX research team inside of marketing. And it was me and the hiring manager, and it was just us two and some contractors building up this new team. Then org shifts again, and we sort of like reorg our team. And then now I'm in charge of some researchers, UX researchers, incredible. And we do traditional UX research and so much more. And we have a startup ability and kind of mentality inside of a large business like a Microsoft LinkedIn owned org where we're able to do a lot of what we want to do. And behavioral science has become more and more of a forefront because now we're not in a mature research organization and we have to be scrappy and we get to be methodologically really curious and creative. So it's become more relevant now than I would say it was when I was more of a UXR IC when I started.
and talk to me about that transition from IC to manager, right? Like that is, do you like, a lot of people take on the management role and go, oh man, I don't like this. You've had previous experience with it, so and
Yeah.
you can both directly and passively, right? Anytime you're in HR, you're watching managers all the time. Do you
Yeah.
how do you approach management? How did you approach that transition? How does it feel for you? Like, do you think you'll stay a manager, or like, do you have the yearn to be back to a high level
Yeah.
IC someday?
Yeah, it's so it's not the first time that I've managed people, but it's the first time that I've ever received support for managing people. It's completely different. It's completely different to be a manager at a LinkedIn that has a lot of um, tools and resources for you, mentoring, coaching for you as a leader, versus like again, some of the other orgs I was in just resource constrained. And so it's like you're in charge of these people, and it's not to like it's the org that's developing, but you kind of have to figure it out yourself. Like you don't have trainings and you don't have meetings where they're helping you learn how to develop other people. So LinkedIn is really good at that, and I really have appreciated that. I think that completely changes your experience as a manager. There's also not, I was really nervous a lot. I was nervous to go into management because my experience as a manager in the past would be more like you kind of get a lot of it's also okay to do this, but there's a lot more like pressure and scapegoating potentially on you as a manager. And I felt like it wasn't really, again, I wasn't really helped or supported sometimes. So it kind of felt like it's my, yeah, sure, you can blame me, but I wish I would, I just wish there would have been more help for me. That's not the case at LinkedIn. So I do appreciate that a lot. I love, I like, I wouldn't say like managing people, no, but I like being a leader in the sense that seeing and helping people develop themselves and getting the opportunity not as a heads down IC where you just don't have the time and visibility to that. Having some time and space where I can coach and mentor other people around me is incredibly fulfilling. And I definitely would love to continue doing that. Now, some of the managerial activities, like being a manager, being a leader is really hard. And there's plenty of managerial activities that I don't love, like budgeting and figuring out, like, there's stuff that comes with that. But again, because I just love hanging out with people and I love humans, getting to do that and getting to then action and like move our team in a certain direction with that ability to be the head of something has been super, yeah, just super great. A highlight for sure, my
And
career.
you've also thought that out outside of LinkedIn, right? Through things like Collective Academy. Like you are very vocal as a teacher and as a leader in the community, particular both here and in LATAM.
Yeah.
What is that? Talk to me about life outside of LinkedIn and how that sort of fits in with how you sort of think of yourself as a professional.
Yeah. So since I graduated in 2020 from the LSE, LATAM has really grown a lot in its expertise as behavioral science in general. We see a ton of leadership in behavioral science from LATAM. At the time, it when I graduated, I felt like I want to bring this kind of skill set and perspective on entrepreneurial and design problems to Latin America. Realistically, a lot of behavioral science knowledge is in English, and that is prohibitive for being able to reach different practitioners in Latin America. And so I liked being able to approach. So I teach behavioral design and entrepreneurship. Everything is in Spanish. I work for a couple different organizations, institutions, and universities across LATAM, from Mexico to Peru to like completely international. Or like, I guess, online. So being able to reach any Spanish speaking person anywhere in the world. And it's been incredible because I'm able to just kind of like, I wouldn't say, it's incredible like expertise in behavioral science I'm offering. It's just localized understanding of behavioral science. It's looking at case studies that are familiar to someone in Latin America. Obviously, Latin America is not a monolith, but when you're looking at some of the studies that have been done in the Western world, sometimes it feels even hard to understand the contexts in which behavior would be impacted. And so there's a ton of examples of people applying behavioral science in ways that I'm able to then highlight as well. Like, here's who's doing work that's actually, speaking of Costa Rica, there's super cool work being done in Costa Rica for behavioral science. And so it's like kind of bringing everything together, and it feels like I can kind of give back in that way. Like, here's how you can use behavioral science as an entrepreneur and as a designer and as a salesperson and a marketing person. A lot of the students are not designers, or they're not going to be behavioral scientists. They're just taking that and they're going to apply it. So that's been, again, super fulfilling. I've done it less and less as my son is now a toddler. I'll be hopefully soon able to get back, but nights are tough with a toddler. So, but it's been, yeah, that's also been such a fulfilling experience.
It does get easier. Bear's 9 now, and I was,
I love the name
periodically.
Bear, by the way.
Oh, we love.
So great.
Oso, come on, man.
Also, Osito. It's so great.
Osito. He likes to. He very much likes calling me Matito, despite the fact that I'm like twice his size. And so, because Mateo is technically Matthew, right? And he's
Yeah.
like, "You're not Matthew, you're Matito," and I'm like, "Okay, buddy, that's not quite how it works in Spanish, but
Yeah,
sure,
yeah. No, let him do it. That's amazing.
we'll make it happen here."
Yeah.
And so, I think you're absolutely right, and I think so often there's sort of this idea that like, well, you could just pick up Matt's book and like run it through a thing and translate it to Spanish, and then like that's what we need. And so much of real and true education depends on the cultural context and the examples and all of the pieces that sort of make that work. As someone who supports 500
Yes.
Sri Lankans, Sri Lanka has its own unique and distinctive culture, and the things that work here. And we're very at Oceans. We talk a ton about sort of like one of the hardest things for oceans divers is coming over that, because most of them work with American clients, coming over that because it's not the same.
Yes.
And sometimes it's better. And sometimes, it's crazy small things like, in Sri Lanka, you have a manager who's very performance oriented. And then your HRBP is much more like if you're having a bad day or need emotional support or those sorts of things that in the US we would typically think of your manager as doing are HRBP. So it's this weird dynamic where you sort of have like a stern sort of, we're going to call it father figure, right? And a more sort of caring maternal figure who then
Yeah.
like, if you're having a tough time, they fight about whether or not, this person's like, ah, before you. And
Yes.
is that better or is it worse? Who knows? But it's
Mhm.
so different,
It's
right?
different. Yeah.
And so it's so great to have cross-cultural leaders like you who have experience in more than one market, who've been around the world, who can speak all, not just when I say speak the language, I don't mean speak the like I speak Spanish, you speak Spanish, like,
Yeah.
but can speak the cultural language,
100%.
right?
Yes.
And that's just so important. And we're so lucky to have you in the field. And I'm so glad that you ended up here. And thanks you for coming and sharing your story, with us, because I think, we are at still at, maybe look 100 years from now, we won't need to tell the story of individual behavioral scientists.
Mhm.
We sort of understand what it looks like, but we're still in this phase where, we need to hear very directly from the KKs of the world how this worked for them and how they experienced it. So thanks so much for coming and
Thank you.
sharing yourself with us and being vulnerable, and talking through the places where it worked and it didn't work. And
Mhm.
I'm so excited to see what you continue to do, right? Like, this is one of the great things about
Likewise.
being a little older is I get to watch, all these great burgeoning super senior behavioral scientists who are going to do way better things than I have done. And like, that's so exciting. Like, there's so much growth in the field right now. And so I'm just so excited to see what you do next. Thanks for coming, KK. It was
Thank you.
nice to talk to you.
Thank you.